Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Nate and Jeremy. Thank you all for showing up tonight. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about ranked choice voting and whether this is a cure-all to our electoral problems. I'll get into some of the more recent quantitative research and see if any of our claims either for or against ranked choice voting hold any weight. All right. It's probably not going to come as a surprise that in the US, voter satisfaction or the general mood of the public is pretty low. This here is, you can see since the late 70s, the top of the graph covered up by my narration, but it's from Gallup, and we can see that over the last maybe 20 years or so, we've had a kind of a chronic, consistently low voter satisfaction. This ends, the Gallup poll ends here from December 1st to the 15th, where satisfaction rates are at 24%. So much has happened since December 15th, I would imagine that it's even lower now. So we've got low voter satisfaction or low public, kind of just a general low public mood. We also have pretty low voter turnout. So this graph here to the left is showing presidential election turnout at the top and midterm elections at the bottom. So we can see that turnout is better for the presidential elections and worse for the midterms. Some things to point out here. Let's see, 2014, our midterm election turnout is around 36%. Into the 2016 presidential race, it's under 60%. The 2018 midterms, 50%. 2020, an all-time high at 66%. The 2022 midterms down to 46%. And then 2024, not quite as high as it was in 2020, but still pretty good in terms of presidential turnout. But even 2020, 2024, where it's relatively high turnout, that can be misleading. So if you look to the right, I picked the 2016 presidential election where turnout is under 60%. But then what does that mean, right? So if we look at what the candidates actually earned from the voting eligible population, our winner, President Trump, for his first term, only got a little over 27% of the voting eligible public to vote for him. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, a little better with 28.5%. Right, so that means, what does that come to, like 55%? Right, so, or I guess 15, well, it'd be under 59% because there's a couple third-party candidates, but a lot of people not voting. Right, so can you have a winner of the presidency who's just getting around 27% of the vote? Well, you can. 2024, our turnout is under 64%, so that's much better. Not quite the all-time high, but pretty good. But again, President Trump, over 31% of the voting eligible public voted for him. For Vice President Harris, a little over 30%. Now, we've got the presidential elections, the midterm election years, but the off-year elections are much, much worse. So these are statistics from Rockford, from the Rockford Board of Elections, right? So in our consolidated election last April, where the mayor's race was kind of the big key ticket item, our turnout in Rockford is under 20%. Right, so if we look at 2023, when the mayor was not running for election and it was mostly school boards and park district, 9.15%. So turnout is quite low, voter satisfaction is quite low as well. So at the center of tonight's talk, we're going to talk about different electoral systems. And I know that doesn't sound all that captivating to grab you right at the top. Okay. I mean, it reminds me of some of you all, that you're too young for this, but like I grew up watching the original Star Wars trilogy. Like I had an older brother, and so I had the hand-me-down toys, right? We had a VCR, we'd watch the movies. But the first movie we ever rented from a video store was the second one. I guess the fifth one, which was the best one. Empire Strikes Back, thank you. So imagine in 1999 when I'm going to, the prequel trilogy came out, and I go to the first one, episode 1, and it's the music and like the narration is on the screen, and it's like a trading embargo, something. So that's, but even though I'm trying to win you over that electoral systems are interesting, if you sit through the rest of this talk, it'll be less disappointing than episode 1, and there's no Jar Jar Binks. All right, so I should start that with a few exceptions outlined in the Constitution, especially when it comes to presidential elections. It's really up to state and local governments to decide most of the guidelines for their elections, like voter eligibility, how elections are conducted. So with that being said, most elections in the United States are conducted under a plurality voting system, also known as first past the post or winner take all. In this type of election, the person who receives the most votes wins, regardless of whether or not they have a majority, 50% plus 1. So, for example, let's look at a plurality voting election. This is Maine's gubernatorial election in 2010. You can see there's a lot of candidates here, and the person who won, a Tea Party Republican, Paul LePage, won with just 38.2% of the vote. And then LePage would win re-election in 2014, also with under 50% of the vote. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Let's not forget about Paul LePage and Maine's gubernatorial race. Now, as the U.S. has chronically low voter turnout and high levels of dissatisfaction, many election reform advocates favor the adoption of preferential voting, or some sort of preferential voting system, to replace the winner-take-all model. At the very least, this would prevent candidates from winning elections without a majority, with under 50% of the vote. But supporters also hope that by improving our system of electing leaders, we can improve turnout and perhaps, maybe, restore people's faith in our democracy. There are different types of preferential voting systems. They vary in the degree of choice given to voters. One form of preferential voting is called ranked choice voting. Although even within ranked choice voting, there are variations, whether you have a primary or it has runoffs. Ranked choice voting allows voters to rank candidates in their order of preference. So therefore, if a candidate doesn't win a majority on the first count, then the second choice of voters who selected the candidate with the fewest votes are reallocated to other candidates. This reordering process continues until a candidate receives a majority. And so you might reorder a voter's second or third choice. So for example here, we've got the 2018 results for Maine's 2nd Congressional District. Okay, so this is the part of New England that is conservative. This is like the northern 2/3 of the state of Maine. Geographically, the largest congressional district east of the Mississippi. It's a district that went for Trump by 10 points in 2016, 7.5 points in 2020, and 9 points in 2024. So we have 4 candidates here, right? The incumbent is a Republican, Bruce Poliquin. At the end of the first vote, or after the votes are first tabulated, right, our incumbent is in the lead, right? He has 46.33%. Jared Golden, a Democratic challenger here, is in second with 45.58%, and then we have 2 independents. Well, since Maine is using ranked choice voting here, we don't have a candidate with over 50% plus 1. So the second, and in some cases, third choice votes of the independent candidates, right, their votes are taken off the table, and then we're looking for their second, the people who voted for them, their second and third choices are then reallocated. Right, so if you look to the right where it says round 2, of the 23,000 people who voted for an independent, over 8,200 decided that's our only choice. We put 1, that's it. We don't want the Republican or the Democrat. But of the candidate, or of the voters who selected a second choice, over 10,000 selected the Democrat, and 47 selected the Republican. So when their votes are reallocated and we have a second round of tabulation, right, the winner is Jared Golden, right? So it's a come from behind victory thanks to ranked choice voting. Okay, we're going to look at some other examples here. But this is basically how it works. We want to make sure someone gets a majority. Cumulative voting is another form of preferential voting. I'm not really going to talk about it much, but just know that it's more than ranked choice voting, right? There's different types of voting systems when it comes to preferential voting, and they differ in varying degrees over, the choice that they give the voters. Perhaps more well known to us, perhaps something that people have followed a little bit more, as who would follow Maine's 2nd Congressional District. But over the summer in New York, right, the Democratic Party have a primary, and they used ranked choice voting. Now, there were a lot of candidates. I cut it off after Scott Stringer. But what we see happening in New York, Zoran Mamdani, he's in the lead, right? After tabulating everybody's first choice, he wins over 43%, but that's not a majority, right? Andrew Cuomo, the disgraced former governor, over 36%. And so it will take 3 rounds of tabulation for someone to get over 50%. Right? And so that was Zoran Mamdani. So another example of how ranked choice voting works. All right, good. Okay. Supposed benefits and drawbacks. As more jurisdictions at the state and local level consider adopting preferential voting systems like ranked choice voting, this has generated debate over its potential benefits and detractions. Think tanks and grassroots organizations like Fair Vote, Represent Women, Common Cause, and others have argued that ranked choice voting improves voter turnout, helps the performance of third-party candidates, helps more women and people of color win elections, and is generally a more democratic voting system. Right? As such, supporters argue that ranked choice voting ensures winning candidates truly reflect the will of the people. In contrast, however, there are other groups, think tanks, grassroots organizations, like the Heritage Foundation, the Honest Elections Project, and the McIver Institute that oppose ranked choice voting. They assert that its confusing structure hurts turnout. They also argue it weakens voters' faith in elections by delaying election results, manipulating outcomes, and undermining the principle of one person, one vote. So in other words, it's undemocratic. And Paul LePage, our main governor, when he saw Jared Golden won, he called it a stolen election. Now, support for and opposition to ranked choice voting somewhat runs along ideological or party lines. Though I should note that of the organizations and think tanks I mentioned, only the Heritage Foundation and Honest Elections Project are openly partisan or Republican groups. The other groups may have liberal or conservative leanings, but are statedly nonpartisan. On an observational level, it seems that the increased partisan divide over ranked choice voting corresponds with its increased visibility and the perception that it helps Democrats win elections. Now, a version of preferential voting, of which ranked choice voting is in the family of, this originated in Denmark in the late 1800s. Now, we're not going to spend much time on its implementation outside of the US, but here are some countries that use ranked choice voting or a system close to it. Australia, in their House of Representatives since 1918, right? In the Australian Senate since 1948. But also, I don't have it alphabetical in my notes, but Fiji, Nepal, New Zealand, Pakistan, Papua New Guinea, Sri Lanka, Denmark, Ireland, Malta, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. So a little more common outside of the US. Now, in the early 20th century in the US, progressive era reformers sought to fight political corruption and challenge the power of political machines and party bosses. So from the 19-teens through the 20s and 30s, around 20 American jurisdictions adopted ranked choice voting. A lot of cities in Ohio, including Cleveland, which was the 5th or 6th most populous city, also New York. However, following World War II, both the Democratic and Republican parties led successful recall campaigns, and they took advantage of the Red Scare to label ranked choice voting as too communist. So by 1962, only Cambridge, Massachusetts still used ranked choice voting in its elections. Ranked choice voting, however, quietly rebounded in the 1990s and is now used in some capacity, either in party primaries or in general elections, in more than 60 US constituencies. Many are smaller towns and cities like Skokie or Burlington, Vermont. I think Peoria is about to implement it. But we have some larger cities as well. For example, San Francisco adopted a version of ranked choice voting in 2002. Minneapolis and St. Paul in 2006. The state of Maine, as a result of Paul LePage's 2 gubernatorial victories with under 50%, Maine went through a ballot measure and legislation. New York, the city, adopted it for primaries with a vote of over 74%, first used in 2021. Alaska adopted it after a 2020 ballot measure. Hawaii approved it for some special elections. Portland, Oregon, voters in DC approved it in the 2024 elections. Seattle has approved it, but it's not implemented yet. It's also used when Academy Award voters select Best Picture. It's also used in the Heisman Trophy Award. Now, Democrats seem to be, at least currently, modern day, seem to be more likely to support ranked choice voting. And the National Democratic Party is considering whether or not to implement it for the use in primaries. However, the state Democratic parties of Colorado and Nevada joined with state Republicans to successfully convince voters to reject ballot measures in the 2024 election. ballot measures which would have introduced ranked choice voting at the state level. Voters in Idaho, Oregon, and South Dakota also defeated ballot measures in 2024, and voters in Massachusetts rejected a ranked choice voting ballot measure in the 2020 election. And although California Governor Gavin Newsom, the former New York Mayor Eric Adams are among the prominent Democrats who oppose it, at least when it came to Oregon and Massachusetts, which are reliably blue states, their state Democratic parties did endorse it and tried, although unsuccessfully, to lobby in favor of it. Now, in addition to the states where voters rejected efforts to adopt ranked choice voting, some Republican-leaning states have explicitly banned it in recent years, either through ballot measures or state laws. So Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Several more, again, conservative or Republican-leaning states are also in the process of banning ranked choice voting through their legislatures or through passing amendments to state constitutions. Of course, there are exceptions. Right, this map has a lot going on. We've got a couple states where they've accepted it, or they've adopted it at the state level. What are these bluer states? I'm colorblind, so this is kind of all the same to me. But there are some states here where local municipalities and cities have accepted it. The darker colored states have banned it. But not all Republicans oppose ranked choice voting. Right? Wyoming is funny because up until just recently, their state Republican Party used ranked choice voting in their own internal elections, but then the state banned it in 2025. In Utah, both Republican and Democratic parties have used ranked choice voting in their own internal elections since 2004. Utah is Republican dominated. In 2018, their state legislature and governor approved a pilot program to use ranked choice voting for local elections in places like Salt Lake City. In Alaska, another conservative-leaning state, albeit one with an independent streak, voters approved ranked choice voting in 2020. And there, voters have narrowly rejected a ballot measure in 2024 to remove it or repeal its use. But with ranked choice voting in Alaska, Alaska voters have elected a very conservative governor, Mike Dunleavy, in 2022, a moderate Republican Senator, Lisa Murkowski, in 2024, and twice a Democratic Congresswoman, Mary Peltola, in 2022. Though all the states that are recently banning ranked choice voting, most of them explicitly say because a Democrat won a state-level race in Alaska. Now, in Virginia, their Republican Party has used ranked choice voting in the primaries since 2021. And the winners of those primaries in 2021 for the governor's race, lieutenant governor, and attorney general all went on to beat Democrats in the general election. Finally, in Maine, despite Maine adopting ranked choice voting, the supposedly moderate Republican Senator Susan Collins still won re-election in 2020. She's like a fake rhino. You know, rhino, Republican in name only. She's not a rhino. She's a fake rhino. She's never broke with Senate Republicans in anything that mattered. And progressives or Democrats are not going to like this. She's going to win again in 2026. I mean, the tide is against her, but the two Democrats running for the Senate position, they're both just horribly bad and scandal-plagued. So, like, if Susan Collins has a chance of winning, she could win again. But that's all to say that although ranked choice voting is becoming more of a partisan issue, Republicans probably shouldn't abandon it because it has worked for them. It doesn't always help Democrats win elections. All right. Okay. Now I want to get to the quantitative data and address some of the claims that supporters and opponents of ranked choice voting make. For starters, how do third-party and independent candidates fare in ranked choice voting? So supporters argue that ranked choice voting improves the performance of third-party and independent candidates. Detractors, meanwhile, assert that ranked choice voting allows candidates with marginal support to win elections. Is it possible that both sides are saying the same thing here? Fear of third parties may explain why many state-level Republican and Democratic parties oppose ranked choice voting. So could ranked choice voting break the political stranglehold of the dreaded two parties? Could this help overturn partisan gridlock and politics as usual? Right, and there have been polls and studies showing that most Americans, a good 2/3, consistently want a third-party choice. Yet, until 2022, there had been no empirically tested study on whether ranked choice voting leads to increased support for third-party candidates. And one of my professors at UIS, I'm pursuing a master's degree there, he was a co-author on this study, so I got to hear a lot about it. Not in an egotistical way, but just like he's very proud to be part of this study. Okay. So you're going to be aware of this, or maybe those of you who voted, if you're old enough to vote, you've been aware of this, that our dominant plurality voting system, the winner-take-all approach, often forces voters to make strategic decisions. How many times, and I'm glad there's research on this because I thought I was the only one, but how many times have we cast votes when we're actually voting against a candidate we really don't like, instead of voting for someone we do like? Right, so with plurality voting, when a third-party candidate is on the ballot, few voters select them because they don't want to waste their vote on someone who can't win or spoil the results. Right, we don't want to accidentally help the candidate we like the least. And you might not be able to see it here. In 2022, in the state of Maine, they had a very, no, not Maine, Oregon, they had a very contested governor's race. There was Tina Kotek, the Democrat, Christine Drazan, the Republican, but there was an independent named Betsy Johnson, who was a moderate or conservative-leaning Democrat who became an independent. Now, polls never showed Betsy Johnson winning, but they showed her at well over 20%. And so part of Nina Kotek, the Democrat, who wound up winning, but only with about 47% of the vote, part of her campaign strategy was to remind people that if you vote for the third-party candidate, you're actually voting for the Republican. You're helping the Republican win. Jeff Merkley, he's a Democratic senator from Oregon. Okay. So, having to make really strategic votes with a plurality system. Okay, so we have this team here, Simmons et al. So et al. Is when there's more than 3 or more people in a study. So we have this team of renowned political scientists, and they created an opt-in internet survey in the first 10 days of September 2020. Their sample included controls for age, education, sex, race, and partisan affiliation. So the survey asked 2 groups of voters to select a candidate for the presidency in 2020. So this is a couple months before the election, so voters are primed for this election. And we have Trump, Biden, but also Howie Hawkins, the Green Party nominee, and Joe Jorgensen, the Libertarian Party nominee. Half of the people surveyed got to select in a plurality voting system, whereas a similar number of voters got to select in a ranked choice voting system. For those who could only pick one person and there's no ranking, well, it's winner take all, of those surveyed, around 3.5% voted for a third party candidate. But for the other half of the people surveyed who got to use ranked choice voting, 7% selected a third-party candidate as their first choice. So this result led researchers to suggest that ranked choice voting elections help the performance of third-party candidates. Now, what this study did not address is what if we actually had viable candidates, like real serious people, not jokes, running for third-party positions, right? If third-party or independent candidates stood a chance of winning, and if voters could cast votes for them without fear of wasting their votes or helping a spoiler, then would more capable people run, right? We wouldn't be stuck with again, jokes like, I guess, RFK Jr. didn't actually wind up running, or Pat Buchanan or Jill Stein. You know, if we had more viable options, then maybe more people would vote for third-party candidates. Maybe that figure would be over 7%. Next up, does ranked choice voting help more women or people of color win elections? Now, there's a whole range of scholarship that addresses the underrepresentation of women in politics. And although in the past 10 years, both parties, but one more than the other, have tried to address this, still, even at the most, kind of the highest percentage in the 118th Congress, so 2023 to 2025, women only comprised about 28% of the seats in Congress. So would ranked choice voting help women? Help women win elections? Well, it just so happens we have two fairly recent studies that are very, very similar. Right, this is the John et al. And Terrell et al. They both suggest that yes, women stand a better chance of winning elections in ranked choice voting elections than in plurality elections. So the 2018 study and the 2020 study, they both looked at California. They both looked at mayoral and city council elections. And they picked 4 cities in California that use ranked choice voting, and they compared them to 7 other California cities that don't, that use plurality elections. And they had controls for population and income levels and racial makeup. The earlier study looked at earlier elections from 1995 to 2015. The earlier study also included women who are people of color as well. And so the earlier study from 2018 showed that in ranked choice voting jurisdictions, women did 6.5% better than women in plurality elections. Now, the second study looked at the same cities, did the same kind of comparison, very similar. It did not differentiate for race, and it looked at elections from 2010 to 2019. The second study saw that women did an 11% better in elections with ranked choice voting. So again, 2 studies around the same time, really looking at very similar cities, both suggesting that women perform better in ranked choice voting elections. Now, does ranked choice voting help people of color to win elections? Well, in 2003, there's a study from a group of political scientists. This is Bowler et al. And they looked at political participation in approximately 100 small, rural, and mostly southern communities. And this study looked at cumulative voting, which is a little different. And they were looking at elections to city councils, county commissions, and school boards. The researchers in Bowler et al. Noted that minority candidates in their campaigns engaged in mass coordination efforts to educate their communities on the benefits of the elections, and that these mobilization efforts actively encouraged voters to pool their votes behind a single candidate, and thus, quote, help Native Americans, African Americans, and Latinos win seats in places where they had rarely if ever, been successful. So it's an older study. It's not actually looking at ranked choice voting. It's looking at a system similar to it. Well, in 2024, we have a team that exclusively focused on ranked choice voting. This is the Crowder-Meyer et al. Study. This found that candidates of color were, quote, significantly penalized in both plurality and ranked choice voting elections. So thus, this 2024 study says ranked choice voting elections had no impact on, neither help nor hurt, no impact on whether people of color won elections. This study is kind of wild, if a study could be wild, but I'll get to it. But it involved a 2-round survey experiment representing a large sample of American voters. The authors specifically did not want to use data from cities that currently use ranked choice voting because they assumed those jurisdictions were more progressive and would skew the results. So we have 2 rounds of surveys here, or 2 rounds of surveys, and they equally divided respondents in a hypothetical election using, again, either a plurality voting contest or one with ranked choice voting. This hypothetical election purposely excluded giving much information about the candidates other than cues about their race and gender through their first and last names. And if you tried to think of the most stereotypical names for like Latinos or Black people, they were probably in this survey. Like if I had them up here, like I would be canceled for being racist or something. Like they're just out of control names, which I think is something that the study didn't actually talk about. But the researchers said they found no study in how these voters, the people surveyed, how they responded to these make-believe candidates. So either in the plurality election or in the first or second choices of the ranked choice voting elections. So this is a study saying that both plurality and ranked choice voting is equally bad for people of color, though of course you would wonder, like, what if you use names that were, I guess, less, I don't know, triggering or less bad or less, I don't know. Okay. What about voter turnout, right? Does ranked choice voting improve voter turnout and faith in the electoral process? And if so, why? There is a lot of research to support this claim. For instance, the Bowler et al. Piece, which was, again, a study of cumulative voting, which is a little different from ranked choice voting. This asserted that political participation of people of color increased by some 4 to 5% when compared against similar communities using plurality voting systems. A 2021 study, the researchers there found that when comparing the voting probability of young adults, who they defined as millennial and Gen Z, when comparing the probability of, for young adults between districts that use plurality and ranked choice voting, the turnout of young people in the ranked choice voting districts increased by 9%. So with younger voters more likely to vote in ranked choice voting elections, the authors of Julich and Cole, they suggest that ranked choice voting may work to lessen the age gap in voter turnout. A more recent study, the research of Dowling et al., 2024, they looked at off-year elections, and they said individuals living in ranked choice voting jurisdictions were on average 17% more likely to vote than in plurality elections. So if ranked choice voting improves turnout, then why? So the aforementioned authors make the case that greater campaign contact is responsible for improved voter turnout. For instance, Julich and Cole believe that due to partisan gridlock, dishonest candidates, and a general negative perception of politics, young voters are less likely to vote. As a result of this and the high housing mobility, political campaigns typically spend less time and energy focusing on younger voters. However, the authors insist that in ranked choice voting jurisdictions, young voters are 12% more likely to be contacted by candidates or campaigns than young people in plurality elections. The Dowling et al. Study mostly agrees that campaign efforts to contact voters improves turnout because in ranked choice voting elections, campaigns behave differently. Right? In addition to trying to persuade people to vote for you, candidates also try to court a second and maybe even a third choice. So in the 2024 Dowling et al. Study, the respondents in ranked choice voting cities were estimated to be 8% more likely to be contacted by a campaign in person and about 3% more likely to be contacted through print mail. So therefore, increased campaign contact in ranked choice voting places may explain why the voter turnout is higher in places that use ranked choice voting. Now, on top of this, in addition to this, studies also suggest that ranked choice voting decreases negative campaigning. We have more civil campaigning. Now, a lot of this focuses on research from other countries. So, for example, Benjamin Riley in a 2022 study argued that preferential voting systems are more beneficial than plurality winner-take-all elections for countries divided by race, religion, language, and ethnicity. He credits this electoral reform with creating moderate policies that strengthen democratic institutions in countries like Northern Ireland, Fiji, Sri Lanka, and Papua New Guinea, right? Because they enable electors to rank candidates in their order of preference. Such voting systems can encourage politicians in divided societies to campaign, again, not just for the first preference votes from their own community, but for second choice votes from other groups as well, thus providing an incentive to pool votes across ethnic lines. So therefore, this accommodation and bargaining promotes cooperation among competing groups in divided societies, right? Also reducing the likelihood of conflicts and ethnic violence. Now, another study from 2006 echoes this claim. Farrell and McAllister, their research suggested that preferential voting systems allow those with historically less political power to become involved in the political process and helps create higher levels of voter engagement. Martha Croft in 2021, she's focusing on the United States. She compared newspaper and Twitter or candidate tweets between cities that use ranked choice voting and cities that use plurality voting. And she concluded that the tone of elections was more civil and positive in cities that held ranked choice voting elections. Right? There's no incentive to take part in mudslinging since you're competing for voters' second choices. The picture on the right, so this is from the New York Democratic primary or the campaign for the New York mayor's race. We've got Mamdani, and on his right is Brad Lander, who is also a competitor. He was New York City's comptroller. Don't ask me what that means. But they campaigned together, right? And they encouraged their voters to rank each other second. And Mamdani wound up winning, and he has endorsed Brad Lander for Congress. Of course, I can't go on without talking about Alaska. What do we have here? Right. Sarah Palin, former governor, former vice presidential candidate. On the right is Mary Peltola, who I referenced earlier. Alaska, because of its small population, they only get one member of Congress, right? So they have an at-large congressional district. For over 40 years, they had one congressman, Donald Young. He passed away in the middle of his term in the middle of 2022 at the age of 88. And so in 2022, Alaska saw a a special election, and then the same people ran again in the November general election. And in this race, we had one Democrat, Mary Peltola, and she was running against two Republicans, including Sarah Palin and then Nick Begich. Now, what happened in this race is Mary Peltola got along with everybody. Right? And so we can see this picture here as well, this photo here. Mary Peltola had been a member of Alaska's state government when Sarah Palin was governor. And they famously got along, right? And during the campaign, they talked about how much they respected and liked each other. And like to hear Sarah Palin say good things about a Democrat, I mean, this was mind-blowing. But they're about the same age. They were both moms. They both had children about the same age as well. And so they talked about how when they were in state government, even if they disagreed, they would have coffee together, or they would go to each other's office and try to lobby, like, well, this is why I support this position. Now, interestingly, in this election here, Sarah Palin did not get along with the other Republican, Nick Begich. And so our two Republicans are very divided. And so after our first round of voting, it's the Democrat who's in the lead with almost 40% of the vote, followed by Sarah Palin and Nick Begich. Well, since no one has a majority, Nick Begich's votes are taken away. And then you have to look at who his voters selected second. So we can see that of Nick Begich's, where are we at? Of his voters, a lot of people didn't put either Sarah Palin or Mary Peltola, but enough selected Mary Peltola to push her over the 50% mark. And then the results a couple months later in the general election, also in 2022, were about the same. But Mary Peltola's surprise victory here, also the first Alaska Native to be elected to US Congress, but this was enough to first convince the Alaska Republican Party that when we have races again, only one Republican's running, right? We're not going to have this divided. We will strong arm, intimidate a Republican to get out of the race if we have to. But then that also convinced a lot of Republican-leaning states that ranked choice voting was bad because it could lead to a Democratic victory. Now, of course, not all studies agree with our aforementioned assessments, right? Does ranked choice voting harm turnout and hurt faith in the electoral process? And if so, why? Okay. One idea is that ranked choice voting is too confusing. So we have a 2015 study from Jason McDaniel, and he was looking at ranked choice voting results in San Francisco. And he compared San Francisco's mayoral elections before they adopted ranked choice voting to it after ranked choice voting. And he found, his scholarship asserted, that ranked choice voting produces higher information costs on the voters, as confusing rank order ballots can lead to ballot errors, such as overvoting, which would disqualify the ballot. McDaniel said that while older and more educated voters can process the information correctly, that ranked choice voting, it makes things more complicated. It obscures the benefits of electoral participation and decreases turnout on the young and less educated. When McDaniel's study controlled for incumbency, candidate race, precinct socioeconomic status, education, racial diversity, etc., his results show that on average, Black voter turnout in San Francisco decreased by 18 points after the city adopted ranked choice voting. His findings would also disagree with those of Ulich and Cole by arguing that the turnout of younger San Francisco voters, those 18 to 24, decreased slightly in the range of 1 to 2 percentage points. Jacobs and Miller, who are actually not political scientists, but they were journalists, they conducted a very similar study looking at Minneapolis. Here they too found that older, lower educated, and minority voters were more likely to find ranked choice voting difficult to understand, and therefore they had greater numbers, higher numbers of spoiled ballots, ballots filled out incorrectly that wouldn't count. Similarly, a 2023 study from Cerrone and McClintock found that voters less familiar with ranked choice voting were severely dissatisfied with it, especially when it produces a come-from-behind victory, like what Jared Golden had. This study argued that due to its complexity, voters favored the status quo of plurality voting, and that ranked choice voting had a negative effect on voter satisfaction and turnout. Their study also disagreed with the contention that ranked choice voting improves voter satisfaction in divided countries by pointing out that the country of Fiji had a military coup in 2006 following a come-from-behind victory in a ranked choice voting election. Meanwhile, a 2016 study by Kimball and Anthony that also was looking at elections in Minneapolis, they basically said ranked choice voting plays no difference. Voter participation for them seemed to be influenced more by the stimulus of competitive local and statewide campaigns rather than the adoption of ranked choice voting rules. And that ranked choice voting elections have minimal effect on rates of voter participation. Now, I would add, is it possible that once voters learn how to use ranked choice voting, the hurdles disappear? Or perhaps the novelty of having ranked choice voting increases turnout, but as people get used to it, they're going to go back to their apathetic status quo. For sake of time, I'm going to skip some stuff here. Some conclusions. Now, practically every study I looked at, the scholars here argued more research needs to be done. And these researchers use statements like suggest, argue, claim, and assert with their findings. Now, most cities that have implemented ranked choice voting elections tend to be more progressive with higher rates of political participation. So one might question the weight of studies that compare cities that use ranked choice voting to those that don't. And so far, a lot of the research has been very minute focused on a handful of cities. However, as more cities and states perhaps approve ranked choice voting, this is going to lead to more data. This could provide a stronger answer to how ranked choice voting affects turnout, voter satisfaction, third-party performances, etc. In the near future, political scientists are going to have data from Washington, D.C., Seattle, even Peoria. But as of right now, political scientists, this consensus seems to have more confidence in the idea that ranked choice voting can improve the chances of third-party candidates, that ranked choice voting can also perhaps improve the performances of women, that it also encourages more positive campaigns and increases the likelihood that voters, at least younger voters, will be contacted by campaigns. Now, what the research seems to be less confident in, what seems to be more up in the air, how does ranked choice voting affect people of color? And how does it really affect turnout? So is ranked choice voting the solution for a broken system? Or will ranked choice voting turn out like other ideas, like term limits or voting by mail, other voting reforms praised by supporters, but with sporadic implementation and inconclusive results. Now, if there seems to be a solution, there are a few states who have found ways to make sure that the people winning elections have a majority, but these solutions are less controversial than ranked choice voting. So for example, the state of Georgia has runoffs. So they have their election in November. If no one earns a majority, then there's a runoff between the top two candidates. For example, right, in 2020, we've got a Senate race. The Republican incumbent, David Perdue, faced by Democratic challenger John Ossoff, as well as a Libertarian. Well, David Perdue is just ever so close to getting that majority, but he doesn't quite get it. And so then, I think it was January 5th, 2021, right, we've got a runoff. And maybe the mood of Georgia had shifted ever so slightly, but John Ossoff here has a come-from-behind victory. Yet the state of Georgia and its post-2021 Republican leadership has not tried to scrap this runoff system. So maybe that's a more workable solution, or one that is not, creating as many waves. Also, Ossoff is running for re-election. He's only 38, so, makes me wonder, like, oh gosh, he's 32, elected to the Senate. Now, Louisiana, Washington State, and California, they have open primaries. Right, so this also guarantees that someone is going to have a majority. Right, so the way it works is that all candidates, everybody running, you could have 6 Democrats, 5 Republicans, 3 Green Party, 2 Libertarians, they all run in an open primary. Right, if no one gets a majority, then there's a runoff with the top 2. The timing is a little different, but they're basically the same system. So this also shows that we're going to have a majority. Someone is going to win, right? We're not going to have a winner with 38% of the vote like Paul LePage. So perhaps this is a more incremental system to at least guarantee someone has a majority and thus the will of the voters. All right, and as I wrap up, here are my sources and question and answer time. All right,